How you doing? Welcome to my page, Corey on the Run. I am Corey. I am a plant-based runner, and I'm currently training for my first Boston Marathon. This is my first week in training, and it's a little bit different than my normal training block. I don't have a normal 16, 18, 20 week block built up for this specific marathon because I'm coming off of Mesa Marathon, which was my last PR, and that happened a couple of weeks ago. So pretty much what I'm doing is a reverse taper when it comes to the build up to the Boston Marathon. Slowly building up my mileage little by little and adding in some cross training to get my aerobic base going a little bit more. Yeah, I also added in some strength training. Nothing too crazy, no like heavy weights or anything, or no high volume or anything. It's really just kind of get back into the motion of doing these strength training exercises and making sure I actually still kind of work on those single leg movements, as well as sleeping in a lot more, which clearly is something that I've been lacking a little bit of because the early morning wake-up calls for those early morning runs. And the thing is that this is a slow process. It takes time, and I'm not really in a rush to actually get back into full tip-top shape when it comes to the Boston Marathon because I know I'm coming off of another marathon not too long ago. Boston's going to be treated a little bit different for me specifically. And the reason being is because I'm not necessarily a fan of racing marathons back to back, especially when it's only about like 8 weeks apart. The way I'm doing it differently is I'm actually treating this more of like I guess a victory lap or whatever you want to call it, because the thing is that I really want to embrace everything there is about Boston. I want to embrace the atmosphere, the environment, the people around me, and I just think it's something that's so spectacular, and it's something that I've wanted to do for a long time, and I really just want to soak it all in when I can. But for me, coming off of my other marathon, I think it's important for me to actually understand that I may not necessarily hit the goal that I want to hit, so why don't I just take it a little bit easier and enjoy it while I can, because this is a historical race and it's a world major marathon. But with that being said, I still have training that needs to get done. I have a specific time that I would like to get, or at least a roundabout, so I'll take you through the process of that. Since this is my first week, we're gonna kind of dive into that a little bit and to see exactly what's kind of going on, especially coming off of my last marathon, and how I'm getting back into doing everything when it comes to marathon training. So when it comes to the first couple runs that I've actually been doing, they've been kind of slow, and they have been very short, which, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with that at all, but it's definitely a bit different for me. I'm used to coming off of high mileage weeks where I'm running close to 50, 60 miles a week, and now I think I topped out at 16 miles this week. And the thing about these specific runs, they weren't glamorous whatsoever. And that's the thing. I think that a lot of runners, when you think about marathon training, the majority of your runs, they're not glamorous, they're just easy effort, slower runs. And this week is all about keeping the heart rate low, the pace is slow, and also the distance is low. But the thing is that with my heart rate, that definitely was not as low as I would like it to be. There were a couple of runs this week where I was getting close to my 150 range, so not exactly as easy effort as I thought it would be. Trying to make sure that my easy efforts are in the 130 to 142 range, because that's pretty much what my zone 2 is. And no matter what the pace is, I just wanted to make sure my heart rate stays within that zone. So I wanted to dive into my paces and my heart rate and a little bit more of the data when it comes to my first week back into training. So first thing I want to start off with is the first run that I actually had this week. It was 3.14 miles. Average heart rate was 137. It says my running performance was 94, which, you know, whatever. The paces were actually kind of where I needed them to be, but if you go down a little bit further, it says my max heart rate was 155. My average was 137, which is fine, but max was 155, and the elevation gains weren't too crazy. So it was one of those scenarios where, like I said, it's my first run back, and I'm not necessarily worried too much about pacing, but when it comes to my heart rate, I think it's a little too high. So there were time periods where I actually did stop to walk a little bit. So for the next day of running, it was a little over 4 miles. Same scenario, average heart rate 142, and my running performance was fair this time, so there's that. Again, there were a couple of times where I actually did walk during this specific run. just to keep the heart rate down a little bit. Again, the heart rate was at 155 at a couple of times, which is not necessarily ideal, but again, I'm still getting into it. So when it comes to the third day, I actually feel like my paces and my heart rate were kind of starting to level out a little bit. My average heart rate was 142, running performance was fair. But when you scroll down a little bit, it says my max heart rate was 157. I know I'd hit a couple of hills every once in a while, which is, you know, that's what happens when you do these specific runs. Like around where I live, there's really no flat area at all. My paces were close to where it's supposed to be when it comes to easy runs. Not saying that I actually need to have an association between a specific pace and an easy effort run, but to me, this is a roundabout where my easy effort runs normally are. So my first run post-marathon was a whopping 6 miles. But hey, that's progress. I'm okay with that. Gonna see how the legs really feel on a long run. I feel like my body knows what to do at this point. It's kind of like, yeah, you're running now. We remember this. Stoplights are the worst. Always happen at the worst time, but you know what? I gotta bring my heart rate down a little bit more because I just went up a little bit of a hill, so I'll take this as a win, I guess, for now. I just want to dive in real quick with that. It was 6.25 miles I did. Average heart rate was 144. Running performance was great for once, which is actually really good. My average pace was around 8:21, which is around where I wanted to be anyways. This is an easy run, like I said before. And this was also a run where I was actually walking quite a bit. I actually walked up a couple of hills to make sure I kept that heart rate nice and low. I definitely wanted to make sure I did that during that specific run. And looking at the paces, it actually, like, I'm right where I need to be when it comes to my easier runs. Maybe a little bit on the faster side, which is fine. So I know I backed off the paces a little bit towards the back end of it because I wanted to make sure I actually kept everything nice and slow, and plus I had a couple of walk breaks in there as well, so that explains kind of like the pace is kind of like fluctuating a little bit. But still, with that being said, this actually was a great run for me, especially when it comes to a longer run. I also wanted to dive into my heart rate a little bit when it comes to my long run. There are a couple of points where you can see that my heart rate was actually getting up a little bit high at certain points. So it was at 160 at one point. I don't know if my actual heart rate monitor was going a little crazy, I'm not sure, but you can actually see that there were a couple times where I actually did stop. My heart rate got down to like 111, and it dropped a couple of times throughout the run. It went back up to 158, 160, then I stopped to walk again. So there was a lot of fluctuation when it comes to my heart rate and getting everything where it needed to be during this specific run. So I'm walking up this hill right now. It doesn't seem like much of a hill, but I'm trying to make sure my heart rate doesn't get too high. And it's really not worth it for me to actually keep running up this hill to get my heart rate elevated so much that's like mid 150s to 160s. It's not worth it for an easy run. So I'm gonna walk up this hill, then I'm gonna start running when I get to the top. I've also been really working on my nutrition post-marathon and also leading into the Boston Marathon training prep. Not to say that my nutrition should really be derailed because I finished a marathon or anything like that, but I think the thing is that if I continue this trend of keeping my nutrition on point and doing the things I need to do when it comes to eating the right things, getting the right nutrients, it'll help me not only through Boston, but it'll help me throughout the rest of the year. I want to make sure I create these habits now so I can continue them all throughout the course of the year, because I think that's really important. And I ended the week with a rest day, which I feel like having a rest day on a Sunday is actually something that's really nice, and I really enjoy it because it gives me more time to spend with Jessie, spend with the pup, and also make waffles, which I feel like I make a numerous amount of waffles, and I love having them around because I can have them throughout the week if I need to. So I'm back to doing that, which is actually really nice. All in all, it's actually a really great week to get back into training. I know it's kind of difficult for me to transition from one marathon to another, but it's been a solid week of training, and I'm actually really excited to see what the next 7 weeks or so are going to bring when it comes to training and leading up to the Boston Marathon. I hope you stay safe out there running, and that's a wrap on week 1 of Boston Marathon training. I'll see you in episode 2.